All right, good evening, sports fans. Welcome in live to the NCAA College Sports YouTube channel. We are live here on Tuesday evening. It is November 11th of 2025. We are live for the second official top 25 college football playoff rankings of the 2025 college football season. And last week we had the first rankings, of course, did show up. And now we're going to see what the updated rankings look like. And I think it will be a little bit easier for the committee this time because it was kind of hard to rank the teams the first week. So we'll see how that turns out, tonight here on this Tuesday evening. I'm going to wait for you guys to join in. So, again, if you are a sports fan, be sure to like and subscribe to this stream. And also, if you are just a college football fan in general, we do all kinds of I do all kinds of college football content on this channel. Be sure to check that out as well. Check out my individual videos. Check out my video from earlier today. I gave you an updated playoff outlook to see which teams are eliminated from the college football playoff picture. Just going to wait for you guys to join in, and then we'll get to talk about some stuff. I also want to know. I also wanted to know which, did you guys agree with the committee last week or did you disagree with them? Because I heard there was a lot of disagreement and then also a lot of, hate towards a conference. I don't know if it was the SEC or if it was something else, but group of five team, I feel like, got disrespected last week. I think there should have been at least one group of five team ranked, but the highest ranked group of five champion was Memphis. So they got ranked. They didn't get ranked in the top 25, but they were in the 12 team playoff field, if that makes sense. You can also call in if you want to this show. I want to hear your thoughts about the rankings, and then we'll talk about maybe also the previous rankings from last week and see what happens from there. We got still plenty of time. We got like 15 minutes, or not 15 minutes. We got like at least over 20 minutes remaining, like 25. So yeah, the rankings haven't come out yet officially. They will come out a little bit earlier tonight than last week did. Last week it came out at about 8 o'clock. Tonight's rankings will be coming out at 7. And then soon as those rankings do come out, I'm going to have to end the stream early because tonight is the Kentucky and Louisville men's basketball game. I'm going to be able to watch that game afterwards. So I do want to get this definitely completed before that. It's not that I'm trying to hate on the rankings or anything. It's that I can't really miss the Kentucky and Louisville basketball game. That's a big game that I look forward to every year. All right, so let's go over the previous rankings from last week as we do get into some things to talk about before we get into the new rankings for tonight. All right, so looking at this first picture here, this is what the rankings looked like last week. This is not the rankings for this week, just to let you know. These are the rankings from last week. So in week 11, we had the top five here. I don't really disagree with the top five at all. I think Ohio State definitely clearly is number one. Indiana probably clearly number two. I was wondering if there was going to be a debate there between those two teams for that number one spot because Indiana's been blowing their teams out, while Ohio State has a win over Texas, and then Indiana has a win over Oregon. So I feel like Indiana's win over Oregon is much bigger than Ohio State's win over Texas, but Ohio State really hasn't had a close game all year. They've been the most dominant team in the country, and then Indiana's been just blowing teams out, but they did not look good this past weekend. I will let you know that right now. They only won by 3 this past weekend, so that was a really interesting surprise there. Um, it could have been a lot worse for Indiana. The worst case scenario would have definitely been they would have lost. But the top 5 I think was pretty accurate by the committee. Texas A&M definitely number 3. I have no problem with that. Alabama and Georgia at 4 and 5 respectively. Alabama is ahead of Georgia because they already beat them head to head, so no problem with that whatsoever. And then Georgia definitely in the top 5 for me. Um, I know Georgia's been inconsistent all year, but I feel like they played their best game this past weekend against Mississippi State. A lot of people thought that was a trap game for Georgia, but it turned out to be not even a close game at all. They won by 20. 6 through 10, I mean, maybe Ole Miss is a little bit too high, but the win over Oklahoma is kind of the reason. And then the competitiveness they had against Georgia. You go back to that game, they were leading in the fourth quarter, and then they let Georgia come back in that game. So I guess I think they're giving credit to Ole Miss for at least competing with Georgia. And I think you look back at that game, they lost like 43 to 36. And then BYU, I do expect BYU to drop a little bit. I don't know how far the committee does drop them. I'll talk about that a little bit later. BYU is at number 7. Texas Tech, I feel like, should have not been behind BYU because I feel like Texas Tech has a better resume than BYU. And you look at the differences, these are 2 teams that beat Utah. Texas Tech beat Utah fairly easily. BYU only beat them by 3. So I think if we're going by score margin and, by the point margin that they won in both of those games, I think Texas Tech should have been ahead of BYU. That really doesn't make any sense. And, I think they probably just ranked BYU ahead of Texas Tech since they were undefeated in the Big 12. Well, they lost to Texas Tech pretty badly, so we'll see how much that affects them. But Oregon at number 9, I have no issue there with Oregon being at number 9. Same thing like Indiana. They nearly escaped with a win over Iowa. Does the committee drop Oregon for that reason? I really don't know what the committee is going to do with Oregon. Notre Dame at number 10. A lot of people criticizing that Notre Dame shouldn't be this high because they lost to Miami. And they don't have any great wins. I think the only great win is probably USC, and then they also have a win over, a 2-loss Navy team, and then a 3-loss Boise State team. So it's not one of the best resumes for Notre Dame. They lost a couple of games to top 25 teams, and Texas A&M who's a top 3 team, and then Miami's sitting there outside the top 15. So we'll call that a top 20 loss there for Notre Dame. Texas and Oklahoma, these 2 teams were left out in the playoff field. I'll talk about that in just a moment. Utah at number 13, I was perfectly fine with them being there. And then Virginia and Louisville. Now, this is definitely the biggest question for tonight for the committee. How far do they drop Virginia and Louisville? That's definitely going to be the question there for the committee to do what to do there. I really don't know how far these 2 teams will drop. I really don't know. I don't think they drop out of the rankings because it would definitely really, make the committee. It would definitely give them a lot of, criticism if they were able to, drop them out just for losing a game like that. Now, to be fair, these 2 games were still pretty close. Virginia could have definitely lost a little bit worser. Louisville did hang in there with California. You look at Virginia, they lost to a 3-loss Wake Forest team, and then Louisville lost to a 4-loss Cal team. Again, that's the differences between these 2 teams. How far do they drop based off of those performances? And, I think Virginia will be ahead of Louisville still because, obviously they got the head-to-head. Virginia does have a loss to a four-loss team as well in NC State. That wasn't a conference game, though, so that is a non-conference game. You got to wonder if the committee is kind of looking back to that game as well. But for Louisville, a couple of losses now. They have a loss now to Virginia, which is definitely their best loss. And then they have that one loss, of course, coming to Cal, who's a four-loss team. And then Louisville has a couple of top 25 wins against Miami and Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh win does look better for them now since they are 7-2. And then the Miami win still is pretty good for them. Now, the question is, do they drop Louisville behind Miami? Because it doesn't seem like head-to-head matters between Miami and Notre Dame. So that's obviously the question. There is some head-to-head, scenarios here in this top 25 from last week. They got Alabama and Georgia correct. They also got Texas Tech and Utah correct, and then same thing with BYU and Utah. But they didn't get Notre Dame and Miami correct. I feel like Notre Dame was a little bit too high, but Miami has a loss to a three-loss SMU team, so that's really why I think Miami did drop behind Notre Dame for that reason. And then Virginia and Louisville again. How far did they drop? That's really the question from these rankings from last week. How far did they drop this week? Again, I don't think they drop out of the rankings this week. I just think the committee would definitely receive a lot of criticism if that were to happen. Give me a second, guys. All right, so let's start with Vanderbilt now. So Vanderbilt, I think they probably go up a little bit bigger because they did win, but it was not I would say it was a bad performance by Auburn. I feel like, going into overtime against a 5-loss Auburn team, I wonder if the committee will look at that. But again, it's really, I think, about who you beat already. Vanderbilt doesn't have much on the resume. I think they have at least one top 25 win, and that was probably against Missouri. And now Missouri is a 3-loss team, which I think Missouri probably drops out. I really don't know. Georgia Tech, I think they probably move up a little bit. They did not play this past weekend. Miami, I think, moves up a little bit. USC probably moves up. Then you look at Iowa. I don't think Iowa drops out. I think they stay in the rankings this week because, I think, after competing against a 2-loss, Oregon team, or not a 2-loss, a top 10 Oregon team, I should say, I think they definitely, deserve a lot of credit. They shouldn't get penalized for losing such a close game because they also have a close loss to Indiana. They don't have any great wins, but, they have like 2 really good losses that they were competitive against 2 top 10 teams. Indiana being their definitely their best loss, and then Oregon being their second best loss. So, yeah, I don't think Iowa, I don't really expect them to drop that much. I mean, I could definitely see them being outside the top 20 at least, but definitely not out of the playoff rankings for this week. Michigan, I do expect to move up. Same thing with, not, those 2 teams. I expect Pittsburgh and Tennessee to move up, even though Tennessee probably didn't deserve to be ranked last week. They got 3 losses to like really, really good teams. Now the third loss came to Oklahoma, and then the losses came to Alabama and Georgia as well. So those are 3 really good losses there for Tennessee, but they just don't have much of a great win on the resume. So that's why I think Tennessee probably should have not been ranked last week, but it's also about who you lost to. Washington and Missouri, I do expect to drop out. Washington losing to a really bad Wisconsin team in a game that they should have won pretty easily. But I think they'll be out this week. Missouri, I think, also will be out. They lost their starting quarterback for the rest of the year. Bo Birbila out with the injury. So you got to wonder if the committee just penalizes Missouri for that reason. But they also got beat pretty badly by Texas A&M. So I do probably expect them to be out this week for this week's rankings. So I think what's going to change here for the rankings this week, The top five definitely is not going to change. Um, Again, the question is, how far does BYU drop? I think Texas Tech will move ahead of them because they beat them head to head. Again, how far does BYU drop is the question. And then same thing with Virginia and Louisville. How far do those two teams drop? Again, I think Virginia will still be ahead of Louisville because of the head to head, even though on resume wise, I think Louisville has the better resume. But at the same time, you got to look at head to head, and that does matter. So I'm going to say that Virginia will still be ahead of Louisville. Vanderbilt, Georgia Tech, and Miami, those two teams probably move up, but the question is, does Miami move ahead of Louisville because of I mean, really head to head does matter, but do they really go ahead of a two-loss Louisville team with the same records? And then also, because of the head to head, I mean, that's really the question there. But I really don't know what the committee is going to do with that head to head there. So, USC, again, I do expect them to move up. I don't really expect Iowa to drop too much because, again, two losses to really good teams in the top 10 in Oregon and Indiana. I still think Indiana's their best loss while Oregon is the second. And they have a loss to a four-loss Iowa State team, which honestly is not great for them, but, it could be a lot worse. Again, I think Michigan will move up as well. Not very much, but Missouri and Washington, I think they'll be both out this week after their tough losses this past weekend. Pittsburgh and Tennessee will move up. So that is the rankings from last week. Let's now show you the first college football playoff bracket projection. So this is what the 12-team bracket looked like in the first rankings from last week in week 11. So the top four teams, remember, they get a bye week in the first round. It's not about the top four conference champions anymore. It's really a different, format. It's a straight seeding for the college football playoff this year. Quarterfinal games will be held on New Year's Six Bowl neutral fields, and then first round games will be held on campuses. So Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, and Alabama, based off of their ranking, they will get those top four seeds, and they'll get that first round bye. Then in the first round games, you got Georgia hosting Memphis. Now, Memphis was not ranked in the top 25. They were a one-loss team going into these rankings last week, but now they just lost their second game to Tulane. You got to wonder if a new group of five team will emerge this week. I think we could probably see that. Memphis losing their second game, South Florida, Tulane. Those two teams probably could emerge here tonight. Or it could be a one-loss James Madison. Don't forget about James Madison. They have not one conference loss, but they're undefeated in the Sun Belt. The one loss came to Louisville, who is a top 25 team in these rankings. So if we see a lot of chaos in the American Conference the next 3 weeks of the season, I think a one-loss James Madison team could jump ahead of a American team with 3 losses, even though they win their conference championship. So that's something interesting to look at ahead, for the next 3 weeks of this regular season, from the, this week and then to the finale. That could be a lot of chaos, and then conference championship weekend. Georgia would be that number 5 seed. So they would host Memphis in the first round. Oregon and Texas Tech, those two teams would go at it. I feel like we're probably going to see a change here for the number 8 and 7 seeds, respectively. I think Texas Tech will probably be that number 7 seed since they beat BYU now, and they are sitting in the driver's seat in the Big 12. The question is, though, do they drop BYU out of the playoff field for losing 29-7 to, Texas Tech? That's definitely something to keep an eye on. And then Virginia and Ole Miss, I do expect that probably to change. I don't think Ole Miss will go anywhere. Virginia, though, maybe Georgia Tech probably sneaks in here as the 11th seed. That's how I see it playing out. But there is a bunch of one-loss ACC teams in those rankings. And not one-loss teams in the rankings, but in the standings of the conference, if that makes sense. Notre Dame, I feel like they probably move up to that number 9 seed. I really don't know what's going to happen here with Notre Dame. BYU again, do they drop out of the playoff field? That's the question. And then Virginia, I feel like they could probably be replaced by Georgia Tech. And then a new group of 5 team will emerge. And I think that probably could be a South Florida or Tulane. That could be my best guess because both of those teams have pretty interesting resumes. South Florida has a win over, they have a loss to Memphis, but they have a win over a Power 4 team in Florida. I know that's not a great win, but, it's against a Power 4 team. I think Tulane probably has the best resume out of South Florida. That's how I think, it's going to go. Maybe Tulane gets that 12th spot. I don't know if a group of 5 team will be ranked tonight. If there is one surprise group of 5 team that could be ranked tonight, I think it could be Tulane. That's just my best guess. All right, so we're about 7 minutes away till the rankings. So that's what the 12-team bracket projection looked like from last week in week 11. And then we go to the teams that were left out. So the 2 teams that were left out was Texas and Oklahoma, 2 SEC teams. These 2 teams right here, I feel like need to win out in order to get to the college football playoff as an at-large team. They're sitting both with 2 losses. I don't know if they're going to make it in, though, because they have such tough schedules coming up the rest of the way, especially this weekend. They're both going to be playing on the road in probably their toughest games of the year, probably. Maybe not Oklahoma, because they've had a very tough schedule all year long, and Texas really hasn't, probably since, the Ohio State game, even though they got a loss to Florida as well. But, for Texas, they will play Georgia this weekend. That's a night game in Athens. Oklahoma's going to be playing a 3:30 game against Alabama on the road. So 2 very tough games coming up for both of these teams that were left out last week. And I think if they lose another game, like let's say they lose this weekend, I think they're going to be out. I don't think a 3-loss SEC team can make it in. Even though Oklahoma might have an argument to probably get in as a college football playoff at-large team at 9-3, I just don't know if it will be enough. Even with a tough schedule, I just think they're going to keep a 3-loss SEC team out since they did that a lot last year. So, yeah, Texas and Oklahoma, again, they need to win out in order to make it to the field of 12 teams. I mean, my best guess, Texas, again, if they lose another game, they probably are out. And then same thing with Oklahoma. So, what's going to happen this weekend between these 2 teams when they go on the road? Do we see at least one of them win, at least these 2 road games? Maybe one of them wins, and then the loser probably, gets, put out. So maybe both of these teams are eliminated this week, or maybe one of them is still alive after winning a road game. So you never know what can happen in college football. An upset can happen anytime, but I just don't feel confident with these 2 teams winning this weekend. I will be real. I think Alabama and, Georgia are just too much for these 2 teams. Maybe I'm giving away my prediction already. I have to do my prediction video on Thursday night, so we'll see what happens there. But yeah, these were the first 2 teams left out, Texas and Oklahoma in the 12-team playoff field. Again, a group of 5 team gets in as the 12 seed, and then the top 5 conference champions get an automatic bid. So that's how it works in the playoff field, but it's also a straight seeding this year. All right, so that was just a recap from last week. We are 4 minutes away until the second college football playoff rankings. Again, they're coming out a little bit earlier tonight at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. Came out 8 o'clock last week. If you guys are enjoying this stream, leave a like and subscribe, and click the bell to get all notifications from me with my new videos coming out every day. During the college football season, we post 5 or 6 videos a week at best. That's definitely my schedule. And then we also will be doing postseason videos as soon as the regular season is over. And then we'll also be doing, playoff predictions when when Selection Sunday happens. So again, leave a like and comment down below. What do you think the rankings are going to look like tonight? Just give it your best guess. And I will be ending it a little bit earlier than probably usual because um, got the Kentucky and Louisville game coming up at 8 o'clock right after the rankings are officially completed. So I wanted to kind of get it done a little bit earlier. That way I could watch the men's college basketball game tonight between Kentucky and Louisville. I am a Kentucky fan, so I got to watch that game. Give me a second, guys. All right, there we go. All right, countdown is almost to 1 minute. We're getting there. And hopefully I'll be able to do a stream next week, but I mean, I know the TV, issues continue for YouTube TV. That's why I'm doing this. And appreciate you guys last week joining in. I know everybody's probably having a, busy night, probably to not watch the rankings, but I think it's very important to watch the rankings every night because just to see which teams will join in. Atlanta Gym fan, welcome back, man. What do you reckon will happen if 4 SEC schools have 10-2 records? Tough question. Maybe they all make it in. I mean, it could be brand bias, to be honest, because they do that with the committee. I mean, we've seen it, happen before. I could see that playing out, though. But Atlanta Gym fan, welcome back into the stream. Hope your night's good. All right, guys, here we go. Yeah, they're talking about the debate between Texas A&M and Indiana. If there's going to be a switch there for the number 2 spot. I don't think Indiana, though, should be really penalized for playing such a bad game, but the committee will kind of look at that a little bit. I just don't know what will happen, though, if it did happen. And also, the question is, how far do Virginia and Louisville drop after their couple of trap game losses? And then same thing for BYU for playing I wouldn't say it was a bad game, but on my part, it was a bad performance by BYU. And I don't think Iowa drops very much because they played such a competitive game against Oregon and they only lost by 2. And I think for the 12-team playoff field in the bracket, I think there will be some changes there. Unless the committee just decides to keep the same teams. And also, national championship game will be held at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, Florida, this season. I actually got a perfect bracket last year in the 12-team playoff in the first ever one. So maybe I can go 2 for 2, but I don't know if I feel confident with it this time or not, since it is just a straight seeding this year. All right, so things are kind of getting worked out. We'll see what the committee decides to do this week. I'm just going to say the top 5, I think, stays the same. I would be very, very blown away if Indiana does drop to number 3 just for a bad game against Penn State. I don't think you can penalize a 10-0 Indiana team for that, since they had the win over Oregon as well, and I think it's a much better win compared to Texas A&M's win over Notre Dame. If you are a college football fan, the rankings are ready to be almost revealed. Be sure to like and subscribe this stream and leave your comments. I want to hear your comments of what you think the rankings will be. I think they're going to go to a commercial break because they're giving their thoughts right now. And I am watching this on Hulu, so I know I haven't been able to, get my YouTube TV back either. So again, 12 participating teams, 8 teams seeded number 5 through 12 will play in a first round game. 4 highest ranked teams will be seeded 1 through 4 and receive first round byes. 5 highest ranked conference champions will get that automatic bid to the playoff. And the next 7 highest ranked teams. All right, looks like they're revealing them now. So number 25 is Cincinnati. I kind of knew they would jump into the rankings. I talked about that a little bit earlier. We might see a Houston team as well. Cincinnati was not ranked last week. Oh, South Florida jumps in there. So there you go. A group of 5 team is in. And so South Florida jumps in as a 7-2 team. So they were not ranked last week. Again, I was really questioning if we'll see a group of 5 team in there. The question is, though, are they really penalizing Memphis for, losing to a really good Tulane team? That's kind of a big question there. I mean, Memphis, beat South Florida head to head. All right, Tennessee goes up to number 23. They move up a couple of spots because of Washington, and then also, who was the other team that lost? Washington and Missouri. So I think Tennessee moves up a couple of spots for that. Pittsburgh moves up a couple of spots as well after, like I said, Washington and Missouri losing. So those 2 teams automatically move up 2 spots. So it looks like Tennessee might be the only 3-loss team again in these rankings for this week. All right, number 21 is Iowa. So Iowa only drops 1 spot, and I talked about that a little bit earlier, that they might just drop out of the top 20, but they played such a close game, and I forgot that Iowa lost their 3rd game. So Iowa is at number 21. They don't get penalized for playing a close game against Oregon. 16 through 20 range, they put Louisville at number 20. So they don't drop Louisville outside the top 20. I think what keeps them in the top 20 is that win over Miami. That's the reason why. So they do drop so they do drop 5 spots for that loss. All right, Virginia does drop just ahead of Louisville. That's 2 losses for them now. But they have the head-to-head over Louisville, so I knew that Virginia was going to stay ahead of Louisville because of that head-to-head. Michigan jumps up 3 spots. Did not play a game this past weekend. So our question's been answered there for Virginia, Louisville, and Iowa. How far would they drop? 1 spot for Iowa, 5 spots each for both the Cavaliers and Cardinals. All right, who is number 17? USC jumps up 2 spots. They beat Michigan head-to-head, so there's the head-to-head. That does matter there. So far, I think it's pretty accurate. Georgia Tech at number 16. They move up just 1 spot after not playing this past weekend. I think it's because Virginia and Louisville both lost, and they did move up just that spot. So I feel like Georgia Tech looks like they're going to be the, that conference champion that will be in the playoff field, just the projection. All right, top 15. There's Miami at number 15. They move up 3 spots. So the head-to-head doesn't matter there between Miami and Louisville, it looks like. Miami also has a loss to a 3-loss team in SMU, and then they have a win over Notre Dame. So I think those 2 wins right there is, or not the 2 wins, but the 1 win against Notre Dame is what's put them in the top 15. And then the losses to SMU and Louisville. The Louisville loss definitely is their best loss. The SMU loss is not their best, but it's against a 3-loss decent SMU team. All right, number 14. Let's see who's number 14. Vanderbilt jumps up 2 spots. So I was wondering what Vanderbilt was going to be like if they had a bad performance against Auburn in a close game. Question is if they would drop or go up, and they did go up 2 spots. And then Utah remains number 13, so they did not move up this week. So I think that's the only team that has not moved up, so far this week. Utah had a bye week, so they had that 1 loss, of course, to BYU, and then that other loss came to Texas Tech. So I'm assuming that BYU will still be ahead of Utah, even though BYU had a bad performance. So at number 12, I'm assuming it's BYU. It's got to be BYU. Got to be. I would be surprised if it was another team. There it is. Yeah, BYU. So they dropped 5 spots outside the top 10. I think that's reasonable. I would not disagree with the committee there. I think that's reasonable for BYU. The loss to Texas Tech and then the win over Utah is reasonable. Head-to-head does matter there. So BYU drops to number 12. You can't drop them behind Utah because of that head-to-head victory. And then Oklahoma comes in at number 11. This is kind of looking like my rankings, to be honest, from yesterday. Even though that's not really typically just a college football playoff rankings, it's really more like just a normal top 25. So Oklahoma is at number 11. And I think what keeps them out of the top 10 is definitely the loss to Texas. I still think that's a game they should have won, to be honest. All right, top 10. There's Texas. Again, head-to-head over Oklahoma. A loss to Ohio State. A bad loss to Florida. But also the win over Vanderbilt. So they look at that head-to-head as well. So I would agree with the committee so far, even though Miami is ahead of Louisville, but Louisville lost to a Cal team that was 4 losses. All right, so Texas is at number 10. They move up one spot after not playing a game this past weekend. Texas has got a very tough test against Georgia this weekend. That's going to be a massive game. There's Notre Dame at number 9. They also got a big test against Pittsburgh. We got a pretty big weekend of college football this week. Oregon moves up one spot, even though they had a close call against Iowa. So they move up to number 8. So it looks like based off of, the rankings, it feels like Texas is going to be in the playoff field in the projection. Oh boy, Ole Miss moves down one. I kind of knew this would be a case here. Ole Miss didn't really play anybody that tough this weekend. And Texas Tech definitely kind of deserves to be up there with, up ahead of Ole Miss because Texas Tech has 3 strong wins over Big 12 teams. They have a win over BYU, a win over Houston, and then also a win over Utah. Those are 3 strong wins compared to the wins for Ole Miss. Ole Miss has a win over Oklahoma. I think that's about it. And then they also had the loss to Georgia. So, yeah, I do agree with the committee making that decision to put Texas Tech at number 6. So I think 6 through 10, except Notre Dame in there, it's pretty accurate. All right, top 5. Georgia still at number 5. No change there. Georgia, I still feel like played their best game this past weekend. There's no question about it. Alabama still remains number 4. Not a great performance against LSU, but still enough to be at number 4. And the head-to-head does matter there between Alabama and Georgia, so Alabama has to be ahead. And Texas A&M will remain number 3. So I do like the committee going with Texas A&M being at number 3, despite the fact that they had an easier, they had a good game against Missouri, but Missouri had a backup quarterback, so that's the reason why. All right, so Texas A&M goes up to number 3 or remains number 3, and I think Indiana and Ohio State will be at 2 and 1 respectively. So there's Indiana. They remain undefeated after a close call against Penn State, and then Ohio State at number 1. So I feel like the rankings are pretty accurate this week. I'm not going to lie. There is like no head. I mean, there's like, some scenarios there where the head-to-head doesn't matter as much, but either way, it looks pretty good. All right, so now the playoff field, the projection 12-team playoff field. So it looks like Oklahoma and BYU are the 2 teams out. So huge drop there for BYU, if I'm not mistaken, but they didn't drop behind Utah, which was really good to see. They still got a pretty good shot to get to the Big 12 championship. The question is, though, do they have to win the Big 12 championship in order to make it in? All right, so the top 4 teams will remain the same. They're not going to penalize Texas A&M or like Alabama and Indiana to lose a conference championship. Texas Tech jumps into that number 6 spot. Georgia still remains number 5. Oregon will jump to the number 8 spot. And then Ole Miss will be at number 7. Again, Ole Miss did drop a spot because they didn't play anybody this past weekend. And Texas Tech, has a much better resume compared to Ole Miss. And then South Florida jumps in as the 12th seed. They're in the rankings this week. Notre Dame gets that number 9 spot. Miami 11. They would have them as winning the conference championship. So Miami is the highest ranked champion out of that top 25. So I would say that's pretty accurate. I'm not going to lie. I think the committee got it right this week. I think this is the most accurate they have been so far. So the top 25, the 12-team playoff projection has the top 4 teams the same. Georgia still at number 5. Texas Tech gets that 6th spot. Ole Miss at 7. Oregon at 8. Notre Dame at 9. Texas at 10. And then Miami and South Florida get the final 2 spots. So the teams again that were left out were Oklahoma and BYU. Again, BYU doesn't have much of a resume with win resume total. And then also, Oklahoma has a much better resume compared to BYU. So I can understand why they dropped BYU ahead, behind Oklahoma. But that is it. That is it. So what are your thoughts on the college football playoff rankings for Week 12? I think the committee got it pretty good. I think the committee got it right this week. I think there's no disagreements here except maybe South Florida probably, they already lost to Memphis, and Memphis probably shouldn't have been penalized, but I really don't know. South Florida definitely, I think based off of performance wise, they probably are the best group of 5 team now. But at the same time, I just don't really know. So, but yeah, I would say the committee was pretty accurate. I would say they were pretty accurate tonight, even though there's a few disagreements with head-to-heads and then all that stuff. Again, I have no problem with Texas Tech being ahead of Ole Miss because, resume-wise, Texas Tech has a better resume, and they have 3 strong Big 12 wins, while Ole Miss just has the win over Oklahoma and then the one loss to Georgia. So I think that's really good that the committee definitely put Texas Tech ahead of a 9-1 Ole Miss team, which Texas Tech is 9-1 also technically. So, but yeah, that's going to be. I don't think there's any much else to talk about. So I think this is going to do it for this stream. We'll be back probably, hopefully next Tuesday night. If I don't have time for a stream, then I'll just probably react to it probably on this TV. But still. I'm going to go ahead and end the stream early because I do want to watch the Kentucky and Louisville game. That's coming up at 8 o'clock Eastern time tonight. But thank you for joining me, and hopefully we'll see you next Tuesday night for the 3rd college football playoff rankings. We are officially 3 weeks out until conference championship weekend, 4 weeks out until the 12-team playoff. Second 12-team playoff era begins, and we'll see what happens coming up this weekend in week number 12. I got my upset alert video coming out tomorrow afternoon. Be sure to check that video out when it comes out and it's uploaded. And then I'll have my game picks and predictions for week 12 coming out on Thursday afternoon. That's my schedule coming up here for the next couple of days in 48 hours. So be sure to like and subscribe this stream. And if you are new to the channel, be sure to check out my videos and click that bell to get all the notifications of a video you don't want to miss. And thank you for watching this stream, and stay tuned for more on the NCAA College Sports YouTube channel. Have a good night, everybody.